Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, former WWE superstar. Of course, he's a WWE Hall of Famer, an absolute legend in the business. One half of the Bushwhackers. He is Bushwacker Luke. Luke, welcome back to the two-man power trip. How you doing?
Whoa, good day, John. It's great to be on your show again. And hello to everybody out in TV land or podcast land. It's great to be here on the Two Man Wrestling Show.
What is going on in your world? What have you been up to?
What am I being up to, mate? Well, I just had that Christmas time, but I was in my last show. I was in Des Moines, Iowa, in the middle of December, and then it was cold, but no snow. No snow, thank God for that. But I've got a busy year coming up, starting in the middle of January, and I'm flat tack. If you want to find out where I am, follow me on my Instagram, Bushwacker Luke. It's all Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's Bushwacker Luke. It's got my head on top of the world map. And so keep up with me, and you'll know what's going on, and see if I'm in your area.
Are you technologically savvy? That's pretty good. You got an Instagram and everything.
So I try to keep up with everything, mate. You know, for an old bastard that's been in the business for 7 decades, I try. Yeah, you have to keep up on the social media.
Yeah, you got to. Everybody's on there. You got to change with the times and make
Yeah,
sure you're.
I've been in this business for 7 decades, mate, and at the moment I'm quoted on Wikipedia as the second oldest man still performing on the squared circle.
Wow. Who's older? Who could be the only guy older?
Uh, the great Kochika in Japan. And the guy behind me is Fujiwara, and I think I've wrestled the both in the 70s. Well, one of them early 70s,
Wow, that's
1970s.
it's
I
amazing.
wrestled them
Yeah.
in Japan. Yeah, it
Wow.
goes back a long time.
So you're still wrestling. You're still active. You're still liking to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, but I still try to keep in physical shape and that. I owned a fitness center on Clearwater Beach, right above Hulk Hogan's memorabilia store for 8 or 9 years, and you know, due to the new owner of the shopping plaza, he put my rent up to get me out. Now my gym, which was 7,000 square feet, is a bar and restaurant. Hey,
Wow.
this plaza now more or less is all bars and restaurants. Hogan's still got his little shop, you know, down there selling his memorabilia in the plaza.
Yeah, Hogan's Hangout, Hogan's Beach Shop. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
that's it. The hangout's right next to the plaza. As soon as the plaza finishes, it's Hogan's Hangout. And that, but 2 years ago, that's when I got me out, but so I got really back onto the road, and I'm pretty getting booked pretty heavy.
I was at the beach shop. I love that area. I was there this summer. Great area. And I was having
Well,
a
yeah.
Hogan Pilsner. There was a very good beer down there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Now I'm on the other end of the beach, mate. I've got another place now. I'm not the owner, but I oversee a place called Penfilo's Beach Bar and Grill on South Clearwater Beach. As you come over from the mainland, there's a roundabout, as you know. You
Yep.
know, as you come onto the beach island, there's a roundabout. To the right is the North Beach. To the left is the South Beach, and I'm on the South Beach down there. We're open from 6 at night to 3 in the morning. We're the last place selling food. We sell food to 2:30, so we're really busy after midnight every night.
Wow, nice. You're keeping very busy, very active. And I like that you're still staying in shape so you can still wrestle. It's great.
Yep, I'm there 5 nights a week at that place.
Man, you like to stay busy, huh?
Yeah, I think I've seen people slow down, and that's the downfall. You know what I mean? I'm keeping busy as long as I can.
Yeah, that's true. They say once you get older, you start slowing down. That's when, when everything might go bad. If you stay busy, all good things happen.
It keeps your mind active, mate. I'm meeting every night. I'm meeting new people from around the country. Of course, Clearwater Beach is a tourist area, as you know. So I'm meeting people, fans from all over the country. They come in and they see my photos around, and they realize who I am. Funny part is, some people think I died many years ago.
No way. Come on.
No, and I
No
got
way.
Butch in March. I have my partner coming over for the WrestleMania weekend. We're going to be working at WrestleCon.
Wow.
He was booked for many tours coming over to the states for the last 3 years, and due to COVID, he couldn't get out of New Zealand. New Zealand only opened up about 4 months ago, and
Yep.
and then a month after it opened up, he got COVID, and it knocked the shit out of him, mate. You know, he's Butch is 78 at the moment. But he's instead of coming over for a whole month, we've got him coming over for 5 days starting on the Friday of WrestleMania. We're gonna be at WrestleCon for 3 days, and we've got two other stores in the LA area for signings.
Are you guys planning on doing anything else together?
You know, well, this is the feel. This is to feel out how he is going to be. We're lucky. He's going to coming from New Zealand. Auckland has a direct flight to LA, so that saves a lot. You know, usually when you come over, you have another 2 to 3 hours layover in LA. You hop on another plane, and you've got 6 hours to come across the country. Well, he's coming because he's got a straight shot from Auckland, New Zealand to LA, and that's where he will be for this tour. And I'm hoping that he handles it okay and we get him back for other tours. But we're feeling him out.
Yeah, get him, get his feet wet. Make sure he likes
Yeah,
it. Everything goes well.
he said that COVID knocked the shit out of him. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Got a bad dose of it.
Yep. It seems to be, definitely an issue for sure. But that's
Yeah.
awesome, Ed. I didn't know the Bushwhackers were coming back for WrestleCon. That's great.
Yes, no, we've never been. Butch has never done a signing in the States. The only time we might have signed a few photos was when he came over when we went in the Hall of Fame. You know, before there was no conventions in the 80s and 90s. There wasn't these conventions going on. There wasn't wrestling conventions or anything like that. You know, and since the mid 90s, all these stores, memorabilia stores, and there's a lot of things going on now in the wrestling world.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And obviously,
And the COVID era sort of boosted it too, because all this online stuff,
virtuals.
so that made it big.
Yeah, the virtual signings.
Yeah, virtual signings.
But that's awesome that Bush is actually going to come over here and do this because I know how rare it is, like you said, to get the Bushwhackers together for a sign.
Yes,
That's super rare.
and with this book that just come out in November, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. The blood and the sweat is from being a villain, for 20 years, and then the tears was being in WWF. So that's the book come out on that, and I just heard on the 31st of December we were #1 on Kindle. By wrestling bios.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Did you expect that from the book or were you kind of
No,
surprised?
well, there's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of stuff like with drug, sex, and rock and roll. I think we put a lot of that in, a lot of that in, and the stuff that happened behind the scenes. The book's mainly about behind the scenes. You know what I mean? It's not about big matches. Maybe mention a few of them, but that was it. It's all about that stuff going on in our lives from when we first started traveling in 1965, 66, we joined up together, and 68, we're going to work for Jim Barnett in Australia, WCW. And then we started going into the east, Singapore, and driving up in Malaya and Asia. Before it was Malaya and Asia, and the civil war was going on before it come Malaysia. So we were driving up while the war was going on. There was a curfew of 5, 5 p.m. But we'd drive up through the jungle and that. After that, and you could hear da 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 in the jungle. Them fighting. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, that is crazy.
Hey,
Wow.
we were young and full of piss and vinegar.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, 7 decades ago. That was crazy.
Yes, yeah. So that was in there. That was the start of the book. Well, the book starts about going back to the 30s and 40s, the wrestling. There's a bit of history there. John Crow, our editor, picked it. He went deep into New Zealand wrestling, and he started when it first started with Lofty Blonkfield and different Americans coming over on boats and staying here in Australia. And then he already starts in the 30s and 40s, and then it gets to us starting in the mid 60s.
Pretty awesome to think, like, like with that book, it's like that's the history of the Bushwhackers dating back all the way back. It's pretty awesome to kind of go through that lineage.
Yes, and John did a good job digging all that stuff up. He dug up more than I knew about the past. When I started, mate, in this business, there was no television, and we'd do shows, and all we'd do is put posters up, and we'd more or less go to the towns in the morning and walk around at lunchtime in the town when everyone was out for lunch. So that was the way of advertising. We were in town. We had radio in the big towns. In the small towns, you'd come in early and get the reporter from the evening paper, because the evening paper come out at 4 or 5 o'clock. If you got in early, like before 10 in the morning, you could do an article, and the guy would take a few photos of you and put you in the evening paper. And that's how we promoted the shows in the country. Crazy, huh?
Yeah,
We
wow. Who
didn't
would
we
have?
didn't
Yeah.
get TV. We didn't get TV till I think 67, 68. And it used to start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and finish at 8 o'clock at night. Crazy.
Wow. Oh my god. Did you keep
Yeah.
track? Cause like they're not filming. Do you keep track? Do you write things down like back then or no? Like how did people keep track of like the shows?
Shows posters in the towns, you know what I mean?
But I mean like the results and stuff. Did you like write it down? It's like maybe almost like keep a diary of what was going on or no?
No, no. After the show, mate, we'd find a place to eat. Find a place to eat. See, New Zealand, most of New Zealand closed down at 6 o'clock those days. The pubs, all the bars, everything closed down at 6 o'clock. Unless you're booked in a hotel that have a house bar for guests, for guests staying in the hotel. And the guests could have guests bring friends. So, if I'm staying in a hotel, I'm in a town, and I'm meeting a few people there, I could bring them to the house bar in the hotel to have a few drinks afterwards. But all the places were closed down at 6 o'clock. You were lucky to get something to eat after the show.
And you can't go out drinking either, apparently. That's not good. That's not
No, no,
fun.
you have to buy your own drink and that. But even in small towns, if we didn't have if we stayed in motels, we'd have to go to the bottle store and buy stuff before, in the afternoon, and go back to the motel and cook something in the motel. If they had a grill there, you put a few steaks on and make a salad, and that was it. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, definitely. So
Yeah, there was no.
how do you go from that to like making your way over to the States and like gaining popularity?
Well, we worked around the east and all that, Singapore and Bangkok and that in the 70s and the 70s, 71, and then Andre came over in 1970, 69, 70, and Butch and me worked with him around the country. Gene Ferree, that was his name, 350 pound, 7'4". He was just a kid then. He'd just been working in England and Europe, and that. We were kids too, in the early 20s. And yeah, we worked with Andre handicap matches and all that, and tags in the main towns with a promoter. Steve Ricker would be his partner, New Zealand promoter, and that. So yeah, so we got to work, and in Australia we worked with Jim Barnett. We worked with a lot of Americans, of course, they brought us over just to do jobs for the Americans. Australian boys and the Kiwis, New Zealanders, would work with King Curtis, Mark Lewin, a lot of big names. They're dead now. Most of them are dead. Killer Kowalski, there's dozens of guys who came to Australia. Jim Barnett had 10 Americans there at the same time. Oh, here's one that's still alive. Sweet Daddy Siki. I see him in Canada now and again when I'm up there.
Hey, Mark Lewin's still alive. He's
Yeah,
living in
Mark.
Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark is still alive. Yeah, still
Married a princess, I think.
Yeah, Mark keeps himself in shape. Mark has always been a health man. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He was in the gym every day in New Zealand. He lived there for 2 years. Him and Curtis lived there for two or 3 years in New Zealand after they left Australia. Mark was the booker for Jim Barnett in Australia. Then he came to New Zealand in 72. We'd already left the country then. We came over, we came over. Andre first come to North America in 71 for the Vachons. Butcher and
Paul and Maurice, the Mad Dog.
Paul
Yeah.
and Maurice Vachon in 1971. And in 72, Butcher and me were wanting to get out of the country. So the promoter talked to Maurice and Paul, and they brought us over to the same territory. Now, when Andre arrived there, Grand Prix was only running one town a night. When we arrived there, about 9 months later than Andre, they were running 3 towns a night. Grand Prix, that was counting Ontario and Quebec. And the Rougeaus, Jock and Jack Rougeau, the father and uncle of Raymond and Jock Jr., they were running one town. So there was 4 towns getting run in Quebec and Ontario each night. The Gardens was hot. The Gardens of Toronto, what's the Gardens called there? Shit, having a brain fart.
The Maritimes?
The
Maritimes, you're talking about Maple Leaf Gardens.
Maple Leaf Gardens, Jack Tunney. That was a hotbed for wrestling. And all the big hockey arenas in Quebec were packed all the time. That was a great time in wrestling. I never realized till about 10 years ago, they said the hotbed in North America was that area in the early 70s. From 69 to about 74, that was a hotbed of wrestling.
Thanks a little bit to you guys, right? Thanks a little bit.
And when I arrived there, we were booked on one show, and then all of a sudden, about 2 weeks later, we had a meeting in the office. The office was on 3 floors. One floor was the clerical side where they did all the booking and that. Then one floor was a gym, weightlifting gym, a proper gym, and then the next floor was a ring and all that sort of stuff. The ring and a running track. And we didn't know all about that. We're on the road every night. Anyhow, they had this meeting, and I thought there was 25 to 30 guys in the territory, counting the locals. 25 guys in each town. And that when they had the meeting, there were 60 guys there. And then I saw all these guys that I'd met in Australia, many years, 6 years ago. They were there in the territory. That was hot territory.
Definitely.
Really hot.
So you mentioned Andre. What was Andre really like? I mean, is he really this big drinker, this big guy? You know what I mean?
Yes.
All these stories, is this actually true?
Yep. And now Andre, I got photos here, but they're on the phone that I'm using with you now. Otherwise, I'd show you Andre in New Zealand, 350 at 7'4". Now, the last show that he did with WWE, he was, he had knee surgery, and he was in Butch and my corner, the Bushwacker's corner, against the natural disasters. He was 540 pounds. So he gained 200 pounds, from 69 to 92. 92, that last match was when we were against the natural disasters. If you look up on Google and that, you'll see an interview with us doing it for the show, the natural disasters, a promo with Andre with us.
Yeah, he's got the canes on his hand, right? The
Yeah, people saw. Now, mate, I travel with this big bastard. I love the guy to death. If he liked you, he'd look after you, and he looked after me and Butch when we arrived in Montreal, and of course, when then after Montreal, we were doing the territories around the States. We worked for Stu, and then we came in the States. Now, I've got to tell you how going to Stu, but we worked around the States, so we met him. He was brought into a lot of territories for a week, in summertime, brought into territories for a few shows, and that we worked with him in a lot of areas, a lot of territories. And then of course WWF. But one night we were with him. We were way out the north of Canada, and we were working against him and I think Dominic DeNucci, God bless him. He just died last year. You remember Dominic DeNucci?
Oh yeah, actually, oddly enough, I interviewed him about a month before he passed. He sounded as healthy as could be, so I was shocked when he passed.
Yes, I was with him too. And that him and of course Dominic DeNucci and Tony Puglisi, they were the big tag teams for Vince and up in Canada too, the Italian connection. Anyhow, I worked with Dominic and Andre up north for a week, and we're driving back. And of course, he had Frank Bauer, his manager, with him, driving the car, and he was driving, or Frank was. Anyhow, they bought 72 beers. I'd say 2.5 hours later, we had to stop at a truck stop to get another 72.
Wow. So he is a big drinker,
So,
to say the least.
a can of beer would be 2 or 3 gulps. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
I can
was a
see that.
can. And that big hand would just go like that. That big hand would just go like that. And the can would be crushed. Bang. Your monstrous hands.
Would he
And
get drunk? Would he get
no,
drunk though, or no?
no, no. He get merry, joke, and all that sort of stuff. But he always walked. He never walked straight. I never saw that big bugger get drunk. He'd joke and ha ha and all that sort of stuff and have a good time. But I never saw him. And Vince was the only guy that let him drink in the end. In the 90s and the late 80s, and that Vince would let him drink in the dressing room. He was going through a lot of pain at the time, that giantitis. He never got shot up, It was too late for him, I think, when they came out with all those drugs, that would control the giantitis, or whatever you
Yeah,
call it.
to control the gland. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and he was in a lot of pain because between the joints, the cartilage, with that hormone, it grows the cartilage between the joints, and it pushes the joints apart, and that's where the pain is. The cartilage starts growing. So there's too much testosterone in their system.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think he was drinking because he was in all that pain, or was he drinking
Yeah.
for
I think
fun
no.
too?
In the end, he'd have before the show. He'd drink 2 bottles of red wine before a match. Yeah, that was to ease the pain and get his mind away from the pain. Of course, that pain. It's the same as people, the bodybuilders that take HGH. You see their forehead come out. Arnold, for one. Arnold, the
Oh yeah.
bodybuilder. And
Yep.
there's a lot of them. You look at them, and the jaw comes out, and that's because the cartilage is in their head. It forces those bone structures apart. And
Yep.
he was drinking, but he was a lot of fun. We'd meet him later for meals. He had special places in Montreal where he used to go and eat. I forget the street, but he'd have a place upstairs on the corner of this off the main street off St. Catherine's, There's the main street in Montreal, downtown. Down one end is east and west. Now one end, the east end is very French. That's where Butcher and me were living. They didn't, if you walked in a store, they talked French to you. They didn't want to talk English, even though they knew English. That's how it was in 1972. That's the party Quebec was trying to pull away from the rest of the country. I don't know when you remember that. You know, Trudeau, not Trudeau's son who's running the country now, but his father. That's when they were trying to pull away and have the money system different and everything from the rest of Canada. Crazy times.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah, we
very crazy.
were there then, yeah, and with Andre, but he took care of Butch and me, you know, and we wrestled him. Edward Carpentier, who was partners with the Vachons in the promotion, and who later became the voiceover man for the French television. Remember Edward Carpentier, the Flying Frenchman?
Oh yeah. Technically
He,
speaking, a former NWA champion. Technically, I guess you could say.
he
Although I
was
don't know if the record books would agree, but technically he was, right?
WWE. He was WWF champion in the late 50s and in the 60s. He had turns of that. He was the first man I ever saw doing what is it called? When you
Flying head
stand on the
scissors.
no, you stand on the corner with your back to the ring and you do a backflip back into the
Oh,
ring.
moonsault. Yeah.
Moonsault. He was doing those moonsaults in the 60s and 70s. Edward Carpentier. He was a former bodybuilder too. Good body, but he was getting on and he became a wrestler, and that was it. That's when he left France and come to Canada.
Why do you think Andre liked you guys so much?
Well, he was young when he came to New Zealand and that, and you know, we worked with him every night, and we joked with him. We stayed in motels around the country, and we were with him during, you know, we'd be staying in motels. The baby face and the hills would be in the same motel, not away from all the fans. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that we just got on. We always got along with them. Always got along with them.
So when you got into the States, what was like your first major territory that you and Butch went to?
Well, that was the first one in North America, the Grand Prix,
What
and
about
I
U.S.?
before we get into the States, I'm going to tell you that we were there for a year and a half, and we were used as one of the top tag teams in the town, not the main. We weren't the top tag team. The Hollywood Blondes were the top male tag team. We were one of the tag teams that we worked against Dino Brito and Gino Bravo a lot around the country, and the two Indians, Billy White, Billy Two Rivers, and another White Wolf or one of the other Indians. And who else? And the Vachons. We spent a year and a half working with those three teams because it was a big territory, you know, over Quebec and Ontario, and that we just worked with those three. So they came up to us and said, you know, you've been here and we've been, you know, kept you on top, but we've got to start using you doing jobs to get the new teams over. And they said, but we'd rather you book you out somewhere else and then bring you back later. And I said, well, book us out. And he said, well, we're going to book you to a territory in Calgary. Now, we never heard of Stu Hart. We never heard of Stampede. So we flew over to Alberta on a Thursday, booked into, they gave us this hotel where all the boys stayed, Notorious Hotel. All the boys stayed there. And Friday, we started. Now, we started in Calgary. They taped every Friday night in the pavilion. There was two arenas in the pavilion. There was the Corral, which held about 12,000, and then there was a pavilion and held maybe 3,500. Now the pavilion was the arena a small arena with seating coming up around it, all around it, and floor seating. This is where they sold the cattle. They did all the horses and cattle they bought in, and they did all, where they have auctions for the animals, right? So it always had that smell. Anyhow, we arrived there the first night and we met Archie Goldie, the Mongolian stomper. And, we were working against the tag team champions this night. And I think it was the semi-final match on the card. And we had to get DQ'd in the end, right? So we worked the match. And that we hadn't met Stu yet. He hadn't arrived. And we worked the match. And in the end, we got DQ'd. I think we had the New Zealand flag or the chain, and we knocked them out. They were bleeding, and we're beating them up. Next minute, some kids were thrown in the ring, and the guy yelled out to us, "Beat him up, champ! Beat him up, champ!" in a high-pitched voice. So 2 kids came in. Next minute, 2 more kids came in, got thrown in. The kids were bleeding. 2 kids were bleeding. They've been, and he said, beat him up. So now we've got the 2 guys we work with and 4 kids were kicking the shit out of them. And then I guess all the referees come out. I can't remember, but we got out of the ring. Now, when we got out of the ring and we walked back to the hole, going down the hallway to the dressing rooms, right at the front was a thick-set man, 5'10", 5'10", is wide at the shoulders, but wider at the hips, about 270. And he says to us, "What the fuck are you doing? They're my kids you're kicking out, beating up." Now we didn't realize that this was Stu Hart, and Stu Hart had 12 kids.
Yeah.
4 girls and 8 boys. So this was Friday night. We kicked the shit out of the kids, and we went back to the dressing room. And that's the first time we spoke to Stu Hart. Now, that TV was showing the next morning at 10 o'clock. And all the kids were knowing because they sold programs, walked around the arena while the show was on and sold programs. From 11 years to 13 years old, they were selling programs around the ring. So everybody knew them in TV land. Now, little did we know that 3 times a year, Stu ran a double show in Calgary. He ran the Friday night show, and then Sunday afternoon, he'd run in the corral. And he'd bring an extra name and a big name from somewhere, a name that he's had here before, but he's brought it back. And there was a big show. So the next night, the Saturday night, we went and worked Edmonton, the second biggest town in the territory. And of course, they hadn't seen us on television. Those days, the television was bicycled. You understand what that is? It's played in one town where you shoot it, and then it takes a week. It's started. They do multiple tapes.
They move it.
And they send them to all the towns in the that have their TV. So all these towns are a week behind. So we go in Edmonton and work for the first time, and the reaction was so. The reaction was so because we worked against the top guys there. I guess the two champions. Anyhow, Sunday we came back. The show that weekend, as I said, they had the show in the corral. And that afternoon when we came out, the people were throwing stuff at us. Now that we had heat already, heat, because they'd seen us beat up the kids on television, but wasn't the heat that you could draw a house, fill a house up in the main event. We had to we had to come back and do more, to get that drawing power. But hey, excuse me, Bubbles, shut up.
She's not a Hart family fan.
Yeah. Hey, shut up. Anyhow, sorry, mate.
Yeah, no problem.
And anyhow, we came back and we worked the second shot in Calgary and people were throwing stuff at us. And that night we took the belts and won the belts. 2 days in the territory were the champions. And that system, and what I'm talking about, the same thing happened in a lot of places. We're only in there for a week or 2 weeks, and we won the belts. Anyhow, that was it. We were at Calgary for a year and a half. Archie left, and we were main events on the card every night. He was, Archie Goldie was the Mongolian Stomper. He left, and then the next minute we were going to Stu's every Sunday afternoon, and that working out the card for the week. And more or less, we didn't realize it, but he was using us as the bookers. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
And we were doing the cards for the week, and that was it on Sunday, and we worked Sunday night. Now, the Stewart's kids were heavy ribbers. You've heard about, you must have heard about the ribs that the Hart kids had done.
Yeah.
Brett was only 13 then, but there was Dean, Smith, and Bruce,
Ross,
and Wayne. They were crazy. Heavy ribs too, especially if someone thought their shit came into the territory and thought their shit didn't stink, who were up themselves, the Hearts would really rib them heavy. Next minute, the talent would be leaving. Crazy. I don't want to start on stories there, but a lot of incidents happened in that year and a half we were there.
But that's great, though. You guys were like super over everywhere you went. I mean, you guys are like instant heat magnets.
Then we were called to go back to New Zealand for the first. The New Zealand promoter had got television. Now this was 1976. He got television in New Zealand. It was called On the Mat, and he asked us to come home for the tapings for the season of On the Mat, which we did, which we shouldn't have done, but we did. We came back to New Zealand and worked a series of events on the mat and blah blah blah, and things didn't go too well there. Mark Lewin and King Curtis were the bookers with Steve Rickard, the New Zealand promoter, and they'd been there now from 1972 to 76, and they'd hotshotted the territory. So when they left after we did the TV series. They'd left, and of course when you hotshot the territory, when the main guys leave and he took talent with him, the territory sort of went on the arse. And they brought us home. We had a lot of newspaper clippings from the States, you know what I mean, in New Zealand saying how good we were doing, and they brought us back home as heels instead of baby faces, and which we should have been, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've been overseas, and they've seen a lot of write-ups and papers about us and all that sort of stuff. But no, they brought us back as heels, and so Butch got into a business for a short time, like a 7-Eleven. Bought a 7-Eleven, and I bought into a nightclub, and I still wrestled, but I never. New Zealand wrestling started went in the. Down the shitter for a while, excuse the language, and I started going back to Australia and working. Now Jim Barnett had left Australia, and the Fullers were running Australia. The Fullers.
Rob and Ron, yeah.
Yeah, Robert and Ron, but no, their dad.
Oh, yes, gotcha.
The Fullers were big names in the States. What was the dad's name? Shit.
Was it Buddy? What was the dad's
Buddy.
name?
But what's the family name? The real name?
Welsh.
Welsh. The Welshes owned. I didn't hear till later, but the Welshes owned part of all the territories from one side of the South to the other side of the South, to Tampa. To the Florida Championship Wrestling. The Welshes were in bed with everything. Anyhow, they're over Australia. They're running Australia. And the houses were half the size of what they were with when Jim Barnett was there. They'd gone in there with a wrestling style, high spots and all that. Well, before it was fight, punch and kick and blood, and then the big comeback. And now they're having the high spot wrestling, and the people that see to them, the people in Australia, were so brainwashed with Jim Barnett stuff that they didn't like. Well, half the people didn't come to the wrestling like it was at that time. That changed. Anyhow, I was working there in Japan, and then the start of '79, I said to Butch, we both got itchy feet. He sold his store, and the nightclub. I got out of the nightclub with my partner. He stayed there, and we came back. I came back in the States. That's when we came to Hawaii, and then went in, and we met in Hawaii. We met Buddy Rose and Roddy Piper on a big show in Pearl Harbor. If everyone, well, the older people know what Pearl Harbor. As soon as you mention that, that's when the Japanese came and bombed in the Second World War. And it was a big show in Pearl Harbor, and I met Buddy Rose and Roddy Piper, and Roddy said, Northwest Championship Wrestling. He said the tag team just left, was leaving, and we need a new tag team. And he saw us wrestle, and he called up the promoter that night, Don Owens, and he says, I've got two guys here that will fill the spot really well. And he said, I'll get them to come and to call you. So he came to us and asked us, and at the time in Hawaii, we'd been there for 3 months. We were just keeping our head above the water. We were working 5 days a month, a different island every week, every night for 5 days, flying over Diamond Head and, living on Waikiki Beach, right across from the pier, where King Curtis had his boogie boards, his rental. King Curtis.
Yep.
Yeah, he had his rental there. We were living in a hotel. It was called the Waikiki Circle, and we living right there, still there, that hotel. And going to the gym early in the morning and spending the rest of the day on the beach. 5 o'clock, going to the airport, flying to the island. The show was 7 o'clock. Back, we'd fly back over Diamond Head, and we'd be back in Waikiki at 9:30 every night.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, that was easy, but the money wasn't there. It was a new promoter, and then up there was a New Zealand promoter and bought Ed Francis out. Ed Francis, who had a son playing for the Patriots.
Oh, yes.
Remember?
Yep.
Oh, it's going back. That was in '69. This is '79. Ed Francis' son was playing for the Patriots. Wide receiver.
Yeah, Russ Francis, I think.
You're right.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head.
Oh, yeah.
Russ Francis. Yeah, I can tell you a little story about that because I'm knocking American football and a guy went over the line and scored a touchdown, and then he's in a telephone box with his hand on the ice, and I'm saying, look at that fucking pussy. He just came on, and he came on because I didn't understand them coming on and off every 2 minutes. They changed, the team would go on, another team would come on, because, you had the offensive and then you had the defensive. I didn't understand all this. In New Zealand football, you stayed on the field for fucking the full 80 minutes or 90 minutes, with 10-minute intermission. You were on the whole time. You didn't change players. 15 players on. Anyhow, I see them going on and off, and this guy's just got his hand and I'm knocking him to hell. Look at that fucking pussy. And that was Russ Francis.
Wow.
And Ed Francis was in the back of the dressing room.
Wow,
that was a classic moment. All the boys laughed about that.
Hey, you're used to it,
I
right?
would say, look at these pussies with all this padding on. Look at these pussies. Real men don't wear pads. They're rugged, they're hard, and they stay on the field for 80 minutes, 90 minutes. And that's what Butcher Me was saying. Hey, I love the game now because I know what it's all about.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
crazy, huh? Anyhow, so Roddy called Don. We talked to Don then that night, Don Owens, and I said we're going to Japan tour. After the Japan tour, we'll come in, and we set the date from the end of the Japan tour, and here we are now working for Don Owens. The second week, we won the belts of Adrian Donis and Ricky Starr, or what's his name, Starr. Ron Starr, Ron Starr. Ron Starr's the guy that exposed the business on the West Coast on was it on CBS or one of the main
Oh yeah.
NBC.
ABC, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, Ron Starr exposed it there and that. And Ron was a great worker. He exposed it 5 years later, 4 years later. But Ron and Adrian were both great workers. You know what I mean? Adrian Donis had a great amateur background too that nobody really knew, but he got really heavy in WWF in the end. He was 350 in that, but he was still taking big bumps, and he had a great brain for the business. Adrian Adonis. Anyhow, we won the belt. Second week, we won the belts off them, and away we went. We were in that territory for a year and a half. We were there actually when Mount St. Helen blew.
Wow.
That night we were in oh shit. The dressing rooms were under the stage. Salem, Oregon, and we worked Salem. It was just 50 miles out of Portland. We come out of the arena, and it was raining. But it wasn't fucking clear water. It was mud coming down. Windscreen wipers were going, and this mud was hitting the windscreen. We wondered why. Then we found out that Mount St. Helena had blown, and that was the soot from the mountain with the rain.
Wow, crazy. Wow, you
We
guys are
were we
dealing with
we
some crazy stuff along the way.
we lived 30 miles away from that mountain. We lived across the border, right across in Portland, in downtown Portland. It's only on the outskirts of Portland. It's Washington State, and we lived over in Washington State. It's only 15 minutes to drive into Portland. It was from where we lived, and that Mount St. Helena was 35 miles away. So we got a lot of soot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, damn.
And then 2 days
Scary.
later, it blew twice, I think, that night. And then 2 days later, that's when it blew and that big mushroom cloud came up. You still look online, they'll show you the mushroom. It was like a big mushroom in the sky, the shape of when it blew the second time.
Scary stuff. Oof.
Yeah. One one old guy stayed on that mountain, he wouldn't leave the mountain. He said, "This is my home, and if I have to die with it," he stayed on that mountain, and the mountain took him.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah, they wrote a big story about that. Anyhow, we were there, and that was our time. That was our first day in Oregon. And now to mention the talent in the territory. Okay, Cowboy, Ron Bass. Then I got Ricky Martel, Roddy Piper, Adrian Adonis, the main
Matt
guy.
Bourne.
Huh?
Matt Bourne.
Matt just started wrestling with his dad. That's funny. We had some of his first matches. Dad and Matt. Thank God you brought that up. Oh yeah, I knew Matt from when he started. Boy, and of course Buddy Rose, the only guy I know could stayed in one territory for 10 years on top. He had a great brain for the business. In WWF, he worked as in the early 80s or late 79. No, early 80s, he worked with Playboy Buddy Rose, and he had the Playgirls with him. That was for Vince Sr. And then Vince Jr. brought him back, and now he's 350 pounds. Remember the blowaway diet?
Yes,
He
yes,
put powder all over his body and got on a fan and blew it off. He says, and his ring weight was 216 pounds.
yes, yes. That was hilarious. Yes.
He was always Buddy was. People looked at that big fat bastard, but Buddy was a smart man. He was always thinking of different ways to keep himself alive. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And he was a great worker. Some of the bumps he took at 350 pounds was insane. He'd go out through the ropes and look like he landed backwards, not over the top, over the second rope or the first, and looked like he hit his head on the fucking floor outside. But he'd hook his foot on the second rope as he went down. Incredible bump, you know. But people think he knocked himself out. And then he could do that upside down bump into the turnbuckle. That fat bastard, God bless him, could do a lot. Yeah,
Hell of a hand.
we joined up. We joined him up in our army. That's when we first formed the New Zealand. You know, we were called before that. We were called the New Zealand the New Zealand Kiwis. And now they changed their name to the sheep herders because we were known for New Zealand, 100 million sheep, and that and that. And we had the New Zealand flag and we're dressed in camouflage. And we brought Buddy into our army, and he looked at us straight away. He saw this good, him holding the New Zealand flag and denouncing USA. That gave him more heat. So all the time we were there, he got an extra run with a different gimmick, you know what I mean? Still Playboy Buddy Rose, but he was in the army. And carried the New Zealand flag, which gave him a lot more heat.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Of course, he suggested that to us, and of course, we knew too. Bringing a guy in, American, carrying our flag, gave us more heat too, because we'd get them to talk and say, you know, I wasn't victorious before, but now I'm with the Kiwis. We got New Zealand flag. Hey, we're unstoppable. You know, all that stuff, you know, and that was it. So we were there. We were there for a year and a half, and Jim, I forgot. Jimmy Snooker was there when we first went there, and they sent him to NWA in Charlotte, and that as soon as we finished our run there, they sent us to NWA in Charlotte. And then 2 months later, Roddy Piper come down to NWA in Charlotte. So now we're all in Charlotte.
The gang's all back together. Yeah.
Not all of us, just about 3 of us. You know what I mean? And Roddy was a heel down there. And we worked with Roddy Piper and Rick Martel for 14 months non-stop. 14 months. Roddy told me before he died that we had 22 consecutive sellouts in Portland. That was the main arena where we did the taping. 22. Yeah, that was a good little territory, mate. We're home most nights. Maybe you stay over one night every 2 weeks, and that was it.
Did you like the Charlotte
when we went to
territory?
Vancouver? You know, we moved to Charlotte then. Yeah, and we were in Charlotte. Yeah, Charlotte was a hard. Yeah, the second week they put the belts on us, but they put the pacifiers on us. The pacifiers are the Mid-Atlantic belts. Ray Stevens and Jimmy Snooker had the world champion belts, and they put the pacifiers on us. That was the belt they put on people to keep them happy.
Right. Yep. Pacify you guys.
It didn't keep us happy because they were running 3 towns a night, and we were one of the main we were in the town that we worked every night. We were the main tag team, and we knew in the main towns and the other towns, the heel tag team was making around $3,000. You know, this is 1981 or 2,500. Where we were making 25, we were making half of that.
Wow! Just because you're on the third town.
Yeah, or the second town, except for big shows, and that the big shows they stacked the cards, and they only ran one town that night. You know, we were working against different people. We worked Rocky Johnson a lot, Rocky and George Wells. You know, and the Rocky Johnson. I already knew Rocky. I met Rocky in New Zealand when I flew home for a show in '75 from Canada. We worked with Rocky. Butch and me worked with Rocky in New Zealand. Then him and the Frenchman who was Roddy Piper's Rick Martel. Yeah, we work with. Now we're working with Rocky now and George Wells for a period, and then who else? Of course, we won the belts of Buzz Sawyer and Matt from Portland,
Matty Bourne, yeah.
Matty Bourne and Matt. They were two. What do they call now? AA. They were top. They're amateurs, top amateurs in the state and their states where they came from, and football players. They were all Americans, and boy, those two kids were wild. They'd slam us out in the middle of the ring and come off the corner on top of us. Then the other one would slam us further out, and the other one would come off the corner to prove that he could go further. This is how they were. They were young and full of piss and vinegar. We worked with them a lot, and we won the belt off them the second week, and we carried on the program, and meanwhile we got a call from a guy who we knew in New Zealand when we went home to New Zealand in the mid-70s, Frenchie Martin. Now he was Dino Bravo's manager. You know, he was Dino Bravo's manager. I don't know what they called him in WWF.
Yeah, he was Frenchie Martin in WWF.
Frenchie Martin, yeah. Frenchie Martin, and that called us and he says, hey, we've got a spot for you here in Puerto Rico. We said, how many days you work? He says, no, you only work 3 days. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you work twice on Sunday. And we said, what sort of money? And he said, the money, which was about 500 more we were making a week, instead of, and we're doing 3,000 miles a week in the NWA on the road, and we're doing 200 miles a week in Puerto Rico, if that. Oof. So, of course, we gave Jim Crockett our notice.
Yeah, a lot better, yeah.
And we didn't know. You don't give Jim Crockett your notice. He's the one that gives you. He's saying, I'll finish you up at Christmas or Easter or whatever, and I'll bring you back 2 years later. We didn't know that was the way it worked there, politics. And we gave our notice and that, and he didn't like that. We dropped the belts. We gave him 2 months' notice. We dropped the belts and went to Puerto Rico. Now, from then on, he wouldn't book us back into the North, Carolinas. Dusty was booker. Dusty worked with us on tour when I was booking other territories, and he wanted us to come back, and Jim Crockett wouldn't bring us back.
Wow.
Anyhow, I'm getting away from the book. Folks, we've got a great book for you to read, and I'm telling too much. I'm telling you the wrestling side of it now, but you'll get, as the territories, you'll get what was going behind the scenes in all these territories that I'm talking about. Yeah, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if you want one signed, a book signed by me, and by January I'll have books by February I'll have books signed by Butch too. You have to email me at bushwackerbrand @gmail.com. Bushwacker, BUSHWHACKER brand @gmail.com. And you can get a signed copy from me at the moment, and later on, maybe 2 months, I'll have the books back from New Zealand, and I'll have Butch will have signed them.
Awesome. And of course, there's a lot of stories of the Bushwhackers when you guys make it into the WWF and meeting Vince and,
yes.
those crazy characters. You guys somehow playing baby faces after being vicious, brutal heels as a sheep herders.
Right. Yeah, that's where the tears come in. The blood and sweat is all these heels, and then the baby face. Now, John, I have an appointment at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
I'd like to carry on my story where I left off in Jim Crockett's territory going to Puerto Rico. I can come back and I can move on how we left and where we went into Puerto Rico, which is very interesting.
Yes, definitely. Let's definitely do that. And of course, if you go online, find the petition to get you into the Royal Rumble this year.
Yes,
So great stuff.
yes. Another Hall of Famer from Atlanta, who was a great referee for years, and then he went to WWF, and he became the manager of Raw. You know
Oh
what I'm talking about?
no, who is it?
The, the colored guy who became the manager of Raw, and he was on TBS for years and years
Oh,
as
Teddy Long. Teddy Long.
Teddy Long. Teddy Long started this. He saw me in a show recently wrestling, and the WrestleMania came, and we're talking to him. He's an old friend of mine from way back, from early 70s. Oh no, mid 70s. And
Nice.
he said, let's see if Bushwacker Luke be in the Royal Rumble. It's 31 years since I did that 4-second stint in the Royal Rumble.
Yep.
So if you could go in there and nominate me for the Royal Rumble, if you go to my Facebook page, there's a link there to go in and just put me in for the Royal Rumble. I'd appreciate it very much.
All right. Thank you, Luke, for all the time. Really appreciate it. We'll have to bring you back and finish it off from the
Yes,
JCP to Puerto Rico to WWF.
yes, and going into Puerto Rico is an exciting story at the start. Anyhow, folks, we're coming back. We're coming back to this podcast. Sorry, John. What is it? 2 men.
2-man power trip, baby. Oh yeah.
Yeah, 2-man power trip, guys. All you people out there, thank you for listening. And remember, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Bushwacker Luke. There's a world. There's a globe behind my head. That's the real me. So go to there and see where I am next. And I may be in your town in March, February or March or April.